The sun was shining brightly that afternoon, and the streets outside the royal palace were bustling with tourists from all over the world. Children laughed as they chased pigeons, couples held hands while taking selfies, and groups of friends jostled each other as they tried to get the best spot to watch the famous changing of the guard. The palace stood tall and majestic, its stone walls gleaming in the sunlight. The air was filled with excitement, a mixture of awe and curiosity that always seemed to accompany such a historic place. Among the crowd was Karen, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a loud voice. She walked with a sense of purpose, but it was not the kind that suggested patience or curiosity. She wanted what she wanted, and she wanted it now. Her expensive sunglasses reflected the palace gates as she scanned the crowd, muttering complaints under her breath about how slow everyone was moving. "Why is it taking so long?" she grumbled. "I don't have all day for this nonsense." Tourists nearby glanced at her, a little uneasy but mostly ignoring her. Karen had a presence that drew attention whether she wanted it or not. Some people were amused, others annoyed, but she did not notice. She was focused on getting closer to the royal guards, who stood perfectly still on their posts. Their faces stern and disciplined, their uniforms crisp and precise. The guards' dedication to their duty was visible in every line of their posture, in the way their eyes scanned the crowd without wavering. Karen pushed past a few people, her handbag swinging against her hip, muttering loudly about how she deserved a better view. She leaned over the rope barriers that kept tourists at a distance from the guards, trying to snap photos with her phone. A nearby guard, noticing her behavior, stepped forward and calmly said, "Ma'am, please stay behind the line for your safety." Karen turned to him, her eyebrows raised, and replied sharply, "I'm not a child. I know how to behave. Move aside, please." The guard remained calm, his face expressionless. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the rules are clear. Everyone must stay behind the line. It's for your safety and the safety of the guards." Karen scoffed and rolled her eyes, muttering something about ridiculous rules. She moved closer anyway, ignoring the guards' polite instructions. The crowd noticed now. Some tourists whispered to each other, surprised at her boldness. Children stopped playing and stared, and parents tugged them slightly back, unsure how to explain the scene forming before them. As Karen tried to edge forward again, she accidentally bumped into another tourist, a young man from another country who was carefully framing a photo of the guard. "Watch where you're going," he said politely, a hint of frustration in his voice. "I can go wherever I want," Karen snapped, turning to him. "This is a public place." The young man looked uncomfortable and stepped back, muttering an apology. Karen, however, was undeterred. She had made up her mind that she was going to be closer to the guard than anyone else. She wanted a perfect photo, one that would show her standing near the stoic royal guard, his face serious, his posture perfect. In her mind, this would be proof of her importance, of her ability to get what she wanted. The guard, noticing her persistence, spoke again, his tone firm but respectful. "Ma'am, I must insist. Please step back." Karen's eyes flashed with irritation. "Insist all you want, but I will not move. Do you know who I am?" she demanded, her voice rising. She leaned even closer, her phone raised, aiming to capture a close-up shot of the guard's face. The crowd began to murmur now, sensing tension in the air. Some pulled out their phones, quietly recording the interaction. Tourists who had been focused on the ceremony now turned their attention to Karen, curious to see what would happen next. The guard did not react to her taunts, maintaining his composure. His training had taught him how to remain calm under pressure, how to handle difficult situations without letting emotions take over. Karen, however, had never been taught patience. She began to pace slightly, fidgeting with her phone, her lips pressed into a tight line. She muttered under her breath about incompetence, about how the world had become so slow, how she could never get what she deserved without confronting people directly. Each word was a spark, building up a fire of frustration that only she could feel. A few nearby tourists whispered to each other, "Is she serious? And why won't she just follow the rules?" Their curiosity mixed with a little anxiety. The royal palace guards were known for their discipline, and the idea of someone defying them in such an aggressive way was unusual. Karen's frustration reached a boiling point when another guard stepped slightly to the side to reinforce the boundary. She stomped her foot and shouted, "I don't care about your rules." "I'm not moving." Her voice echoed across the courtyard, catching the attention of even more onlookers. People started gathering around, forming a small circle, their eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. The lead guard, sensing the potential for a serious incident, raised his hand slightly, signaling for calm. "Ma'am, please step back. You are making this unsafe for yourself and others." Karen, however, was no longer listening. Her face was red with anger. Her hands clenched tightly around her phone and handbag. She felt wronged, invisible, and disrespected. In her mind, the guard's calm demeanor was a challenge, something to overcome. The thought of being ignored or controlled by someone in uniform was unacceptable. She wanted to assert her authority, to prove that she could bend the rules to her will. The tourists around her held their breath. Some whispered, others discreetly moved back, sensing that something more dramatic might happen. Karen, oblivious to the growing tension, stepped closer. One hand reached toward the guard's shoulder as if to shake him, but then, in a sudden burst of anger, she grabbed at the front of his uniform. The crowd gasped.
Cameras flashed.
The guard's eyes widened slightly, but he did not react violently. Instead, he maintained his stance, using careful movements to avoid injury while signaling for backup. Karen's grip tightened, and her voice rose even louder, demanding that the guard move aside. The air was thick with tension, a mix of fear, disbelief, and the buzz of smartphones recording every second. Tourists whispered to each other, some saying, "I can't believe this is happening," while others shook their heads, unsure whether to intervene. Even from a distance, the other guards could sense the escalation. They began moving closer, preparing to step in if necessary. Karen, lost in her own anger, did not notice them approaching. She was focused entirely on the guard in front of her, convinced that she was right and that the world owed her compliance. At that moment, a silence fell over part of the crowd. People were holding their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Karen, consumed by frustration and entitlement, did not see the consequences that were building with every step she took. The palace guards, trained to handle such situations, remained calm, waiting for the exact moment to act to protect themselves and maintain order. This scene, ordinary in a place filled with tourists, had become extraordinary in an instant. Karen's impatience and sense of entitlement had set in motion a series of events that no one could have predicted. The crowd watched, fascinated and anxious, as the tension between a single determined tourist and the disciplined royal guard continued to grow. The sun reflected off the guard's shiny buttons and polished shoes, highlighting the contrast between Karen's chaotic movements and the guard's perfect posture. Each second stretched, each breath held, as Karen's determination collided with the guard's training. In that moment, it became clear that the story was no longer about sightseeing. It was about human behavior, control, and the consequences of impatience. And just as Karen prepared for her next move, the crowd could sense that the incident was about to reach a turning point, one that would forever change the afternoon for everyone present. Karen's frustration had reached a peak, and her impatience was no longer subtle. She had pushed past boundaries before, but now she was standing dangerously close to a royal guard who remained calm, collected, and completely focused on his duty. The crowd surrounding them grew larger, some people trying to move closer for a better view, others stepping back, worried about what might happen. Phones were being raised to capture every detail, as the tension in the air was almost palpable. Karen, ignoring all instructions, took a small step forward, her hand twitching toward the guard's uniform. "I said move," she yelled, her voice cracking with anger. "I'm not leaving until I get what I want." Her eyes were wide, her face flushed, and her movements increasingly frantic. Those around her could see that she had completely lost control of her emotions. The guard, trained to remain professional no matter the provocation, maintained his posture. His eyes were focused, his expression neutral. He knew that reacting with anger or force would only escalate the situation. Instead, he subtly signaled to another guard nearby, a small nod that went unnoticed by the crowd. He also kept a firm grip on his stance, positioning himself so that he could defend without hurting anyone. Karen, however, was not thinking about calmness, safety, or rules. In her mind, the guard's refusal to move was a personal insult. She wanted to assert her authority, to show that she could demand what she wanted and get it. She leaned forward and grabbed the front of his uniform, pulling slightly. The crowd gasped collectively. Some people stepped back instinctively, while others whispered to each other, astonished by the audacity of her behavior. The guard didn't strike back. Instead, he used a technique taught during training. He kept his hands close to his body to avoid being grabbed, while simultaneously using his shoulders and posture to reduce any force from Karen's pull. He calmly said, "Ma'am, please release my uniform. You are hurting yourself and making this unsafe." Karen's response was not reason or logic. Her anger took over completely. She shook her head violently and pressed harder, attempting to push the guard aside. "I don't care," she shouted. "I deserve to be closer. Step aside now." Her voice echoed through the courtyard, drawing even more attention from tourists, who paused their own activities to watch. By now, other guards had quietly moved closer, forming a small protective perimeter around their colleague. Their movements were subtle but precise, designed to prevent escalation while ensuring safety. Karen didn't notice them at first. Her focus was entirely on the single guard in front of her. She was consumed by a sense of entitlement, believing that rules didn't apply to her, that she could act however she pleased, no matter the consequences. The crowd was on edge. Parents whispered to their children, warning them to stay calm. Teenagers excitedly recorded videos, commenting quietly about how unbelievable the scene had become. Older tourists exchanged glances, shaking their heads at Karen's behavior. Some began calling out to her, politely suggesting that she step back, while others simply observed, uncertain about how to respond to such aggression. Karen, however, heard none of this. Her face was red and her breathing was rapid. In an instant, her anger reached a dangerous level. She grabbed at the guard's neck, her hands clumsy but forceful. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Phones quickly recorded the shocking scene. The guard's eyes widened slightly, but he did not retaliate. Using a controlled movement, he gently pushed her hands away and stepped back a small distance to reduce the immediate threat, all while signaling for backup. "Step away from me," Karen yelled, her voice rising to a pitch that could be heard across the courtyard. She shook her head, determined to continue her aggressive behavior. Her movements were erratic, her emotions raw, and her sense of reality distorted. To Karen, the crowd, the rules, and even common sense no longer mattered. She felt wronged and invisible, and the only way to assert her presence was through force. The other guards now fully realized the seriousness of the situation. They moved with coordinated precision, surrounding Karen while keeping their eyes on her every move. They did not want to harm her, but they needed to protect their colleague and maintain the safety of everyone nearby. The tension was thick, almost tangible, as the crowd watched silently, phones recording, hearts racing. Karen, still unaware of the growing number of guards around her, tried to grab the guard again, this time with more force. Her movements were wild, desperate. She leaned forward, her body trembling with anger, trying to choke him. The crowd reacted immediately. Some shouted warnings, some pulled their children back, and others stood frozen, unsure what to do. The young man she had bumped into earlier now held his phone steady, capturing the moment for what he knew would become viral footage. The guard, still calm, used training techniques to protect himself. He kept his hands close, avoided direct contact, and shifted his weight carefully to prevent injury. He spoke clearly and firmly. "Ma'am, you are harming yourself and others. Step back immediately." Karen ignored him completely. Her sense of entitlement and fury blinded her. She did not consider the possible consequences: legal trouble, embarrassment, or even injury. In her mind, the world had wronged her, and the only solution was to continue fighting for what she believed she deserved. At this point, the crowd had grown significantly. Tourists, palace staff, and even a few nearby photographers paused to watch the dramatic confrontation. People whispered, commenting on her behavior, some expressing disbelief. How can she do this? And does she not realize who she's attacking? Others focused on the guard, impressed by his composure and professionalism under such extreme provocation. Backup guards finally approached within arm's reach. Their presence alone began to change the dynamics of the scene. Karen, now realizing she was not alone in facing the guards, became even more frantic. She flailed, yelled, and resisted every attempt to calm her down. Her anger had turned into panic, and her sense of reality was slipping. One of the guards, maintaining complete control of his emotions, extended a hand gently toward her shoulder to guide her away from the immediate danger. Karen yanked back, screaming and shaking her head. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, the sound of phones recording, whispers and gasps filling the air. It was clear to everyone that this was no ordinary dispute. It had become an incident that would be remembered for years. Karen's frantic attempts to assert control were failing. The trained guards were methodical, moving as a team to ensure she could not harm anyone, including herself. Slowly, the guard she had attacked guided her toward a safer area, away from the ceremonial line of duty. Her face was red, tears forming at the corners of her eyes, not from remorse, but from the intensity of her own anger and frustration. As Karen struggled, the lead guard calmly spoke. "Ma'am, you need to stop. You are creating danger for yourself and others. Step back now or further action will be taken." The words, calm and firm, were almost lost in her yelling. But finally, the presence of multiple guards, the firm voices, and the realization that her actions had escalated beyond control caused her to falter for a brief moment. She stopped moving forward, her breathing heavy, her hands trembling. The crowd noticed, sensing a small shift in the energy around her. Although she had paused, Karen was far from calm. Her anger and frustration still simmered beneath the surface. Her sense of entitlement had not diminished, but the presence of authority and the growing audience had created a temporary barrier to further violence. Tourists continued to record the scene, whispers of "Wow, she's crazy," and "I can't believe this" floating through the air. This confrontation, which had begun as impatience and frustration, had escalated into a dangerous, unforgettable moment. Karen's behavior had drawn the attention of everyone in the vicinity, and the professional response of the guards had prevented the situation from turning into something far worse. The tension in the air was electric, and everyone knew that the next few moments would determine whether Karen would finally face the consequences of her actions or continue her frantic, entitled behavior. As Karen struggled to regain composure, the guards remained calm, professional, and unyielding. They had seen many difficult situations, but moments like this tested not only their training, but also their patience. Meanwhile, the crowd watched, fascinated, anxious, and eager to see what would happen next. It was clear to everyone present. Karen's desperate attempt to control the situation had failed, and the next steps would be critical. Her actions had put her at the center of a viral story that was already beginning to unfold, and the consequences of her entitlement were only just beginning to appear on the horizon. The moment Karen paused, even for just a second, was enough for the other guards to fully step in. They approached calmly but firmly, moving around her in a way that created a protective barrier between her and the guard she had been attacking. Their presence was professional, disciplined, and unmistakably serious. The crowd took notice immediately. Cameras and phones were pointed toward the scene, recording every second while whispers spread through the gathering. People were both shocked and fascinated by the unfolding event. Karen, however, did not see the precision in their movements. Her mind was a whirlwind of anger, disbelief, and frustration. She felt cornered and humiliated, and she lashed out with every ounce of energy she had. "Get away from me!" she shouted, waving her hands wildly. "This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong." The lead guard, standing just a few feet away, spoke clearly and firmly. "Ma'am, you have assaulted a member of the Royal Guard. You are creating danger for yourself and others. You must stop immediately." Karen's response was a sharp laugh, almost incredulous. "Assault me? I just wanted a picture. I wasn't hurting anyone." Her voice, however, betrayed the panic that was creeping in. She tried to pull away, but the surrounding guards remained composed, blocking her path without using force. Their movements were strategic, designed to protect her, themselves, and the tourists nearby. The crowd had grown considerably. Tourists who had been enjoying the ceremony now crowded around, phones in hand, recording and commenting. Children clung to their parents' hands, sensing the tension. Some people whispered, "She's completely out of control," while others said, "The guards are handling this so well." The contrast between Karen's frantic behavior and the guards' calm professionalism was striking. Karen, realizing she could not push past the line anymore, tried a new tactic. She raised her voice even higher, demanding attention, hoping that her yelling would intimidate the guards into letting her go. "I'm not leaving until I get what I want. Do you hear me?" she screamed. One of the guards standing slightly to her left spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, the police have been called. You must stop resisting and step away immediately. Further actions will be taken if you continue to act violently." At the mention of the police, Karen's anger seemed to spike. Her face turned redder and her hands trembled with frustration. She shouted back, "Police? What police? This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong." Her words echoed through the courtyard, drawing even more attention from the crowd. The lead guard now signaled to the backup officers to move closer, ensuring that Karen could not injure herself or anyone else. 2 more guards arrived from nearby, joining the perimeter. Their presence was quiet but commanding. They positioned themselves carefully, using body language that conveyed authority without aggression. Karen's attempts to push past them were now met with resistance she could not easily overcome. Meanwhile, tourists continued filming. The scene had transformed from a minor disturbance into a full-blown incident that people would talk about for weeks. Phones captured every detail: the flailing hands, the frantic shouting, the calm determination of the guards. Social media would soon amplify the moment, making it far larger than the courtyard could contain. Karen, realizing that her physical attempts to control the situation were failing, shifted tactics. She began to argue, pointing fingers and blaming the guards for being mean and unfair. "You're supposed to serve the public," she yelled. "I pay taxes. I deserve respect. This is outrageous." The guards remained unflinching. One of them stepped slightly closer and extended a hand to guide her toward a safer area, away from the ceremonial line. "Ma'am, please cooperate. The police are on their way. Stepping back is the safest choice for everyone." Karen shook her head violently and attempted to push past him. Her movements were desperate, chaotic, and increasingly erratic. She muttered about injustice, about rules that didn't apply, and about how she should be treated differently. The crowd watched, some in disbelief, some in fascination, and some whispering to friends about the audacity of her behavior. By now, the lead guard had moved alongside her, speaking in a controlled tone. "Ma'am, you need to stop resisting. This is your final warning. Failure to comply will result in arrest." Karen's eyes widened. The word arrest struck her like a bolt of lightning. For a brief moment, her bravado faltered. She looked around at the crowd, noticing the wide eyes, the phones recording, and the faces of shock and disapproval. Panic began to replace her anger, though she still struggled to maintain her sense of control. Her attempts to break free became less coordinated. The guards used their training to guide her gently but firmly toward the edge of the crowd, away from the immediate vicinity of the ceremonial guards. They did not use force unnecessarily, but their teamwork ensured that she could not harm anyone, including herself. Tourists continued to comment in hushed tones. "This is insane. She's actually attacking a guard," said one man. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," whispered another. Children clutched their parents' hands, and some teens giggled nervously, whispering about how this would go viral. The presence of multiple guards and the professionalism of their response only highlighted Karen's out-of-control behavior. Karen's frustration reached another peak. She shouted, cursed under her breath, and swung her arms, trying to create distance. But the guards remained calm and coordinated, guiding her with minimal force. Their focus was not on punishing her, but on keeping everyone safe, including Karen herself. Finally, one of the guards spoke loudly and clearly. "Ma'am, this is your final chance. Step back and cooperate, or you will be detained by the police when they arrive." Karen froze for a moment. She realized, with a shock, that the situation had escalated far beyond what she had intended. Her sense of entitlement, her anger, and her frustration had led to a confrontation with trained law enforcement officers, all recorded by dozens of witnesses. The implications of her actions began to dawn on her, and panic started to replace rage. Her breathing was heavy, her hands shaking, and her voice faltered slightly as she whispered, I just wanted a photo." The guards continued to maintain a professional stance, keeping her calm and moving her gently but firmly toward the perimeter of the crowd. Bystanders could see the shift in Karen. Her fury had not vanished, but the reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. Minutes later, the sound of police sirens became audible in the distance. Karen's eyes widened further, and she began to realize that there was no way to escape the consequences of her actions. The guards continued their careful, methodical work, positioning her safely as the authorities approached. By now, the crowd had formed a larger semicircle, everyone aware that something significant was happening. Phones were still raised, recording every second. Social media posts were already beginning to emerge online, with witnesses commenting about the shocking behavior of a woman confronting a royal guard. Karen, still in shock and panic, finally allowed herself to be guided to a safer area, away from the ceremonial line and the other guards. Her breathing was heavy, and her voice trembled as she mumbled excuses and complaints, realizing that the situation had gotten completely out of control. The lead guard spoke once more, his tone firm but not harsh. "Ma'am, the police will arrive shortly. Please remain calm. You will have a chance to explain your actions to them." Karen nodded reluctantly, her face red and her hair slightly disheveled. The panic and anger that had dominated the last several minutes were beginning to give way to a dawning understanding that her actions had consequences far beyond her expectations. As the police arrived and took over the situation, the crowd slowly began to disperse, murmuring among themselves about what they had witnessed. The guards returned to their posts, their composure intact, and their training evident to all who had observed. Karen was escorted by law enforcement, still protesting softly but no longer physically aggressive. The incident had lasted only a few minutes, but for those present, it felt like hours. The combination of Karen's entitled behavior, the professional response of the guards, and the reaction of the crowd had created a scene that would soon be seen around the world. People spoke in hushed tones about what had happened, many shaking their heads in disbelief, while others praised the guards for their calmness under pressure. Karen's confrontation with the Royal Guard was over for now, but the consequences were only just beginning. Videos would circulate online, stories would be told, and lessons about entitlement, patience, and respect for authority would be discussed widely. The incident had transformed a typical day at the palace into a moment of public reckoning, one that Karen would not forget, and that others would remember for a long time. By the time Karen was escorted away by the police, the courtyard outside the royal palace was buzzing with whispers, murmurs, and the clicking of countless smartphone cameras. Tourists who had been present at the scene were still talking in disbelief about what had happened. The videos recorded on their phones were already being uploaded to social media, spreading the shocking incident to viewers far beyond those who had witnessed it in person. The palace grounds, which just an hour earlier had been filled with excitement, admiration, and curiosity, now carried a sense of tension and fascination as word of Karen's behavior traveled quickly. Social media, as always, amplified everything. Within minutes, clips of Karen pushing and yelling at the royal guard began circulating online. People across the world were commenting, sharing, and reacting. Some were outraged at her behavior. Others were fascinated by the calm professionalism of the guard. Hashtags quickly emerged, referencing the unusual incident, and news outlets started picking up on the story. Even people who had never been to the palace felt compelled to watch and comment. Karen's name, previously unknown outside her immediate circle, was suddenly everywhere. News websites published articles describing the incident in detail. Headlines read things like, "Tourist attacks Royal Guard in shocking incident," and "Royal Guard remains calm amid public assault." Many articles included footage from multiple angles, highlighting both Karen's aggressive behavior and the guard's remarkable composure. Experts were invited to comment on the situation, analyzing the psychology behind entitlement and aggression, and praising the guards for their professionalism and restraint. Meanwhile, Karen's social media presence began to suffer immediately. Friends and followers were shocked by the videos, some expressing disbelief and disappointment. Memes and comments poking fun at the incident began circulating, highlighting the contrast between Karen's frantic behavior and the stoic guard. It became a classic example of how entitlement and aggression can backfire, and people were quick to comment on it. The phrase "Karen at the palace" began trending, turning her behavior into a global talking point. At the palace itself, staff members and officials reviewed the situation carefully. The guards involved were praised for handling an unpredictable, potentially dangerous scenario with precision, calmness, and professionalism. Their ability to maintain safety without escalating violence was highlighted as exemplary. Tourists who had been nearby were interviewed, and they spoke about the shock of seeing someone confront a royal guard in such a bold and aggressive way. Many expressed admiration for the guards' calm demeanor and praised them for keeping the situation under control. Karen, in contrast, faced widespread criticism. People online described her as entitled, reckless, and completely out of control. Discussions appeared across forums, news comment sections, and social media platforms dissecting every part of her behavior. Many commenters noted that she could have avoided the entire situation by following simple rules and exercising patience. Others pointed out that her insistence on getting what she wanted, despite repeated instructions, had led to a public spectacle she would never live down. As the news spread, journalists began reaching out to witnesses for first-hand accounts. Tourists described the escalating tension, Karen's increasingly frantic movements, and the guards' calm professionalism. One witness, a young mother, recounted how she had held her child close, unsure of what would happen next. "It was terrifying to see someone act so out of control right in front of a royal guard," she said. But the guards stayed calm, and that was reassuring. They handled it perfectly. The videos themselves became the subject of analysis and commentary. People marveled at the guard's ability to remain composed under extreme provocation. They noted how he kept his hands close, avoided direct confrontation, and carefully guided Karen away without hurting her. Experts praised the training, discipline, and experience that allowed the guard to de-escalate what could have been a dangerous situation. Meanwhile, Karen's attempts to assert control were scrutinized as a case study in entitlement, impatience, and poor judgment. Public reaction was not limited to commentary and discussion. Memes, jokes, and viral posts spread rapidly across social media platforms. Some poked fun at Karen's outburst, while others highlighted the contrast between her frantic behavior and the guard's calm composure. The incident became a cultural reference, a story shared in both amusement and disbelief. It was a reminder that actions have consequences, especially in public spaces and in front of trained professionals. Meanwhile, Karen's legal situation began to develop. Police reports confirmed that she had been charged with assaulting a law enforcement officer, resisting orders, and creating a public disturbance. Legal analysts commented on the seriousness of the charges, noting that they carried potential fines, community service, and other consequences. People online debated the severity of her punishment, but the consensus was clear. Her actions had gone far beyond a simple misunderstanding or minor frustration. Karen herself began to experience the reality of her public infamy. Calls, emails, and messages flooded in from friends, family, and even strangers, all commenting on the videos. Some were sympathetic, suggesting she had a bad day, but the majority were critical, highlighting the recklessness and entitlement that had led to the incident. Her social media accounts were inundated with comments, many pointing out that her behavior had been caught on camera and would follow her for a long time. In contrast, the Royal Guard's reputation soared. People praised his composure, professionalism, and dedication to duty. The incident was shared as an example of the best practices for handling unexpected confrontations, particularly in high-pressure public settings. Many people noted that his calm approach prevented a potentially dangerous situation from escalating further, and that he had shown admirable restraint in the face of aggression. The incident also sparked broader discussions about public behavior, entitlement, and respect for authority. Teachers, psychologists, and social commentators used the story as an example of how patience, respect, and self-control are critical in public spaces. Articles and videos analyzed the situation, emphasizing the importance of understanding boundaries, following rules, and maintaining composure, even when frustrated. Karen's actions were frequently cited as an example of what can happen when those principles are ignored. As the days passed, the videos continued to circulate. Social media users compared different angles, analyzed her behavior, and discussed the guard's response. Karen became a symbol of public entitlement and impulsive behavior, while the guard became a symbol of professionalism and discipline. The story was covered in newspapers, on television, and in online forums, reaching audiences far beyond the palace itself. Meanwhile, the palace took steps to ensure the safety of both visitors and staff. Barriers were reinforced, and guidelines for interacting with the guards were reviewed and clarified. Staff members received reminders about maintaining professionalism in public situations, and the guards involved were commended for their exceptional handling of the incident. The palace became not only a place of history and ceremony, but also an example of how to manage unexpected confrontations effectively. Karen, on the other hand, faced a growing reality she could not ignore. The combination of legal consequences, public scrutiny, and viral attention meant that she could no longer act as if nothing had happened. She had become a cautionary tale, an example of how entitlement and aggression could spiral out of control in a matter of minutes. Her attempts to justify her behavior were overshadowed by the overwhelming evidence captured on video and the public reaction that followed. In the end, the incident was remembered as much for the guards' calm professionalism as for Karen's chaotic behavior. It served as a lesson for people everywhere about the importance of patience, respect, and understanding boundaries. The public fascination with the event continued, not because of the conflict itself, but because of the stark contrast between a single individual's entitlement and the disciplined response of trained professionals. The viral nature of the story ensured that Karen's actions would be remembered long after the day itself. Social media posts, news articles, and public commentary created a permanent record of the incident. People continued to discuss it, analyze it, and share it, making it clear that such moments, when captured and shared widely, could have lasting consequences. By the end of the week, the story had reached millions of viewers worldwide. Karen had become infamous, while the Royal Guard had become a symbol of calm, professional authority. The incident sparked conversations about behavior, responsibility, and the power of social media in amplifying events. It reminded everyone that in public spaces, actions matter, and that composure, patience, and respect for rules are not just virtues, they are essential for safety and order. After the incident at the Royal Palace, Karen faced the reality of her actions in ways she had never imagined. The police had detained her temporarily, and reports of her aggressive behavior were officially documented. Witnesses, security footage, and social media videos provided clear evidence of what had happened, leaving little room for denial. The initial shock she had felt when the guards restrained her had grown into a heavy, uneasy awareness that her behavior had consequences far beyond the momentary frustration she had felt in the courtyard. Karen's first realization came when she returned home. The messages on her phone were overwhelming. Friends, family, and even casual acquaintances had seen the videos or read the news coverage. Some offered words of concern, while the majority expressed shock, disappointment, and outright criticism. Social media was filled with comments about her actions, and her personal accounts had become a hub of discussion, tagging her name and recounting the incident in detail. For the first time, Karen truly felt the weight of public opinion pressing down on her. Meanwhile, legal proceedings began to take shape. She was formally charged with assaulting a law enforcement officer, resisting orders, and creating a public disturbance. The seriousness of the charges was made clear to her, along with the potential consequences: fines, mandatory community service, and a requirement to attend anger management programs. The legal reality was sobering. What had started as a desire to take a closer photo and assert her will had transformed into an official record of criminal behavior. Karen's sense of shock grew as she realized the long-term impact her actions could have on her personal and professional life. The news coverage continued to evolve. Television programs revisited the story, analyzing Karen's behavior and the response of the guards. Legal experts discussed the charges she faced, while psychologists commented on the mindset that leads to such public outbursts. Social media continued to buzz, with people sharing clips and memes that highlighted both her aggressive behavior and the calm professionalism of the guards. Karen's actions had inadvertently sparked a nationwide conversation about entitlement, patience, and respect for public spaces. As the days went by, Karen's social circle began to react. Some friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the attention and disapproval that her actions had generated. Others offered advice or support, but it was clear that her reputation had been damaged. The viral nature of the incident meant that anyone searching her name online would immediately encounter videos, news articles, and commentary about what had happened. She had become a cautionary example, a living demonstration of how quickly public behavior can spiral into widespread infamy. Karen herself struggled with feelings of embarrassment and frustration. She replayed the incident in her mind repeatedly, remembering the guards' calm faces, the crowd's reactions, and the moment the police arrived. Every detail reminded her of how out of control she had been, and yet her pride made it difficult to fully accept responsibility. She felt a mixture of shame and denial, caught between acknowledging her mistakes and resisting the public narrative that had formed around her. In contrast, the Royal Guard involved in the incident was praised widely. Interviews with witnesses highlighted his calm, professional response. People admired the way he handled aggression without escalating the situation, keeping himself, Karen, and the surrounding tourists safe. Articles emphasized the importance of training, composure, and patience in public service. The guard's actions became an example for other law enforcement officers, a demonstration of how to de-escalate tense situations effectively. His reputation and credibility were enhanced, and he received commendations from the palace and public alike. Karen's legal obligations soon required her to participate in an anger management program. She attended the sessions reluctantly at first, skeptical that they would provide any real benefit. But over time, she began to confront the deeper causes of her behavior: impatience, entitlement, and a lack of understanding of boundaries. Therapists helped her recognize how small frustrations could escalate into aggressive actions, and how her insistence on control had endangered both herself and others. The lessons were difficult but necessary, offering her a chance to learn from a public mistake that had gained global attention. Community service was another consequence she faced. Karen spent hours assisting local programs, working under supervision to help those in need. The experience was humbling. For the first time in a long while, she was placed in situations where patience, cooperation, and respect for rules were essential. Slowly, she began to understand the importance of humility and how actions in public spaces could have real, lasting consequences. She realized that entitlement and aggression were not just social faux pas. They could escalate into dangerous, life-changing events. Public commentary continued to be a part of Karen's life for some time. She saw people referencing her actions in conversations, online discussions, and even casual jokes. It was a reminder that the world does not easily forget public behavior, especially when recorded and shared widely. She understood that this was a turning point, a moment where she could either learn from her mistakes or continue to let pride and entitlement define her. Karen's reflection also extended to her personal relationships. Friends and family questioned her behavior, expressing concern about her temper and her tendency to escalate minor frustrations. For some, the incident was a wake-up call, a clear demonstration of how quickly unchecked emotions could spiral into consequences that were difficult to reverse. Conversations that had once been casual or lighthearted now included discussions about self-control, respect for authority, and the responsibility one carries in public spaces. As weeks turned into months, the public interest gradually settled, but the lessons remained. Karen had become a figure remembered for a specific moment of poor judgment, but she also had the opportunity to grow and change. She realized that patience, respect for rules, and awareness of others' boundaries were not just polite suggestions. They were essential for maintaining safety, order, and personal dignity. The incident had been a harsh teacher, but it had taught lessons that would stay with her for a lifetime. In contrast, the Royal Guard returned to his duties with heightened recognition. Colleagues and the public acknowledged his calm, professional handling of a dangerous confrontation. He continued to perform his ceremonial duties with the same discipline and poise, now with an added sense of respect from those who had witnessed the incident. For him, the situation reinforced the importance of training, patience, and the ability to manage conflict without escalation. His story became one of professionalism and composure in the face of unexpected challenges. Karen, meanwhile, continued to navigate the consequences of her actions. She complied with all legal requirements, completed her community service, and participated in her anger management program. Slowly, she began to rebuild her reputation, though she knew that the incident would always be a part of her story. She had learned in a very public and unforgettable way how a moment of entitlement and aggression could spiral into legal, social, and personal consequences. Over time, Karen reflected on what had happened at the royal palace. She realized that her behavior had not only endangered herself and the guard, but had also affected those around her, from tourists to palace staff. The incident had been a lesson in humility, a reminder that in public spaces, respect and composure are vital. She began to share her experiences quietly, advising others about the dangers of impulsive behavior and the importance of thinking before acting. The incident, though dramatic and widely publicized, ended up teaching multiple lessons to everyone involved. For the public, it was a cautionary tale about entitlement and respect for authority. For Karen, it was a personal reckoning, a confrontation with her own behavior and its consequences. For the Royal Guard, it reinforced the importance of training, professionalism, and calmness under pressure. And for those who witnessed it, either in person or through videos online, it became a story remembered for the stark contrast between reckless entitlement and disciplined composure. Ultimately, Karen's actions at the royal palace became more than just a viral incident. They became a story about learning from mistakes, understanding consequences, and realizing that public behavior can have a lasting impact. She would never forget that day, the lessons it taught her, and the ways it reshaped her understanding of responsibility, patience, and respect. Though it had begun as a simple desire to get closer to a royal guard for a photo, the event had transformed into a life-changing experience. Karen's entitlement had collided with authority, professionalism, and public scrutiny, and the outcome had been clear. In a world where actions are recorded and witnessed by many, no one is immune from the consequences of their behavior. And so, as time passed, Karen carried with her the lessons of that fateful day, a reminder that patience, respect, and self-control are not just virtues. They are essential tools for navigating life, public spaces, and human interactions. What started as a moment of chaos became, in the end, a story of reflection, growth, and the enduring importance of responsibility.